Well, first off, I've documented every step that I use to find high performing properties. Anyone from seasoned investors to beginners will benefit from how I have simplified what can be a very onerous or even complex process. But probably the most important part of the whole property investment process, that is research. So apart from proceduralising your research so that you make less mistakes and stick to a checklist, I also believe the vast property data out there is important, particularly when used in conjunction with fundamental research. Okay, fundamental research is when I have now chosen my suburbs for further research based on some great data insights and now need to see what factors beyond the data make it likely to grow. These could be proximity to schools, transport nodes and other lifestyle considerations. There could also be some key infrastructure developments in the pipeline, such as a new hospital or an overpass that will make the area even more accessible or desirable beyond the good supply and demand data statistics or DSR score. Ultimately, the number of properties you own will be decided by how much equity you build over time for funding subsequent purchases. Either you save a deposit for each purchase or you fund those purchases through capital gain increases, and I know which one I prefer. The rate of growth determines how soon your properties will replace your normal earned or employment income. Economists have been telling us for centuries that an imbalance between the supply of goods and the demand for these goods ultimately affects their price and the movement of price. So in any given suburb, if the supply of properties available does not keep up with the demand from tenants and buyers, prices will go up. The RedWorks research model is all about pinpointing those suburbs, showing a growing imbalance between supply and demand, and then using a tested process to narrow down the options to what is commonly referred to as a property hotspot. DSR stands for demand to supply ratio, which reflects the gap between the demand for property and the supply of property. The score is a numerical representation of that gap between supply and demand, and it ranges between 0 and 48. Okay, a score of 48 would indicate extremely strong demand to supply, and therefore high pressure on prices to rise sharply in the immediate future. A score of 24 is the theoretical balance point where prices remain flat in the short term. So I would want to take a closer look at suburbs with a score of say 35 or more, and therefore would shortlist a handful of potentially a few hundred suburbs in the range of 35 to 48. Okay, we look at a range of statistical property data such as auction clearance rates, stock on market, vacancy rates, etc. And depending on how the suburb scores for each of these variables, a total score is then produced and added up to what would be a maximum of 48. Okay, first of all, it's objective. It removes any emotion out of selecting suburbs for further research, which is good because many investors begin their research based on emotional input or what someone else has told them. Secondly, it's instant. We have made it possible to scan over 15,000 suburbs for capital gains potential and make it available at the click of a button, which saves investors an inordinate amount of time if they were to do this manually and as thoroughly as is required for exceptional capital gains. But best of all, you can shortlist suburbs, as I've mentioned, for more in-depth fundamental research. So you might decide to pick 10 high-scoring suburbs out of a few hundred based on their proximity to where you live or any other criteria that suits your investment approach. And for those about to purchase a new property, you might want to check the DSR score for the location before making a final commitment. And indeed, if someone has given you that hot tip about an area, well, here's your chance to objectively determine whether or not the area is likely to outperform the market and deliver great capital growth. There are a number of avenues to explore. You can download my research guide on this web page, and perhaps it would be worth your while reading the article I write every month in YIP magazine, where I uncover everything about the score and how it can be used to invest successfully.